The Pacific sun beat mercilessly against the white sand of Makatea Atoll, a forgotten speck of land that appeared on only the most detailed nautical charts. Dr. Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her brow as she adjusted the metal detector's sensitivity, scanning the shoreline where last month's storm had shifted decades of sediment. Her research vessel, the Cousteau's Dream, bobbed in the turquoise lagoon like a patient steel guardian. "Still nothing but bottle caps and fishing hooks," called Marcus Chun, her graduate assistant, from 30 meters down the beach. His enthusiasm had waned considerably since their third day of fruitless searching. Elena's team had come to Makatea following reports of shipwreck debris washing ashore. Fragments that carbon dating suggested were far older than any recorded vessel in these waters. The French Polynesian government had granted them exclusive research rights, hoping the discovery might shed light on the region's colonial maritime history. The metal detector's steady pulse suddenly accelerated into an urgent staccato. Elena dropped to her knees, brushing away sand with archaeological precision. Her gloved fingers touched something solid wood, darkened by centuries of salt water. As more sand fell away, the outline of a rectangular crate emerged, roughly the size of a coffin but deeper. "Marcus! Dr. Ramirez!" Elena shouted. "I found something." Her team gathered as Elena continued excavating. The crate was bound with iron straps that had corroded into rusty streams down its sides. Barnacles clustered around its edges like ancient jewelry, and strange symbols were carved into its waterlogged surface. Not any script Elena recognized from her studies of Pacific. "Culture," Dr. Sofia Ramirez, the team's historian, photographed the markings while Marcus began preparing the lifting apparatus. "These symbols," Sophia murmured, "they look almost European, but I've never seen anything like them." As Elena brushed sand from the crate's corners, a sound stopped her cold. It was faint, barely audible above the whisper of waves against shore, but unmistakably human. A voice, muffled and distant, speaking words that made her blood freeze. "Please don't open it." Elena jerked her hand back as if the wood had burned her. The voice came again, clearer now, speaking in accented English that sounded centuries old. "I beg of you, leave it buried. Some things must remain hidden." Marcus stumbled backward, his face pale. "Did you hear?" "We all heard it," Sophia whispered, her camera forgotten in trembling hands. The voice continued, desperate now. "I have kept it contained for so long. Do not undo my sacrifice. Please, I implore you." Elena stared at the crate, her scientific mind warring with primal fear. Every instinct told her to cover it with sand and walk away. But the archaeologist in her, the woman who had dedicated her life to uncovering the past's secrets, found herself drawn to this impossible mystery as the sun began to set. Painting the lagoon in shades of amber and crimson, Elena made a decision. That would haunt her dreams. They would bring the crate aboard the Cousteau's Dream. She had to know what lay within, even as the voice continued its desperate pleas, growing fainter as darkness fell across the atoll. The crate rested now in the ship's climate-controlled laboratory, silent as a tomb. But Elena could swear she felt it watching her, waiting. As the Pacific night wrapped around them like a shroud. 3 sleepless nights had passed since they'd brought the crate aboard. Elena sat in the ship's laboratory at 3 a.m., surrounded by historical texts, maritime records, and her laptop screen's harsh glow. Coffee cups formed a defensive perimeter around her workspace, each one a testament to her growing obsession. The voice had spoken twice more since that first day, once when Marcus had attempted to take wood samples for dating, and again when Sophia had tried to sketch the mysterious symbols. Each time, it pleaded in that same archaic English, begging them to abandon their investigation. "Found something. Elena muttered to herself, highlighting a passage in a digitized shipping manifest. From the British Colonial Office. The document, dated 1847, listed the cargo of a transport vessel called the HMS Retribution. Convicts bound for the Australian penal colonies. Supplies, weapons, and one curious entry that made Elena's pulse quicken. One sealed container contents. Classified. Deliver unopened to Governor Macquarie. Priority LPA Sophia. Entered the lab, drawn by the light. Her usually perfect hair hung in disheveled strands, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Can't sleep either? Look at this. Elena turned her laptop screen. The HM's Retribution departed Portsmouth in March 1847 with 127 convicts and a crew of 43. It was supposed to arrive in Sydney 6 months later. Supposed to? It never did. The ship vanished somewhere in the Pacific. No wreckage was ever found, no survivors rescued. Until now. Elena gestured toward the crate, which dominated the laboratory like a silent accusation. Sophia pulled up a bowl chair, her historian's curiosity overriding her exhaustion. What about the classified container? Elena had been wondering the same thing. She'd spent hours searching colonial records, prison documents, and shipping manifests. Finally, buried in the personal papers of a retired naval officer, she'd found a reference that chilled her. According to Captain William Hartwell's private journal, they weren't just transporting criminals. There was one passenger who wasn't. Convict scholar named Alistair Blackwood. Cambridge educated, expert in ancient languages and occult studies. The ship's hull creaked around them, and both women glanced nervously at the crate. Elena continued reading from her notes. Hartwell writes that Blackwood claimed to have contained an ancient evil and was transporting it to a secure location in the colonies. The captain thought he was mad until strange things began happening aboard the ship. What kind of strange things? Crew members reporting whispers in the dark, tools and equipment moving on their own, and double quotes. Elena hesitated. 3 sailors threw themselves overboard, claiming something was calling to them from the cargo hold. As if summoned by their conversation, the voice emerged from the crate stronger than before, filled with desperate urgency. You must not continue this research. I sealed it with my life's work, with every ward and binding I knew. If you break those seals... The voice trailed off, but its implication hung heavy in the recycled air. Sophia gripped Elena's arm. Maybe we should listen. Maybe some things are meant to stay buried. Elena stared at the crate, noting how the barnacles seemed to form patterns around the strange symbols, as if they too were part of some ancient design. Her scientific training demanded answers, but something deeper, something primal screamed warnings. Outside, the Pacific stretched endlessly in all directions, dark and vast as the questions multiplying in her mind. Whatever Alistair Blackwood had contained within that crate had been worth sacrificing his ship, his crew, and his own life to keep sealed. But was Elena strong enough to leave the greatest discovery of her career unopened? Asterisk, by the 5th day, the voice had begun to change. Gone were the desperate pleas and dire warnings. In their place came something far more dangerous. Seduction. Elena found herself drawn to the laboratory at all hours, often discovering she'd been standing before the crate for minutes at a time, with no memory of walking there. The voice spoke, to her now in educated, cultured tones, addressing her by name, though she'd never introduced herself. Dr. Vasquez, it whispered during her morning coffee. Such a brilliant mind should not be constrained by fear. Think of what knowledge awaits. Within, Marcus had grown increasingly agitated, spending most of his time on deck, claiming the ship felt wrong below decks. Even Captain Torres, a weathered man who'd sailed these waters for 30 years, mentioned strange dreams and the feeling of being watched. Only Sophia remained in the laboratory with Elena, though her presence had become more protective than collaborative. She'd begun sleeping in the lab, claiming she wanted to monitor any changes in the crate's condition. In truth, Elena suspected Sophia was monitoring her asterisk. "It's been 6 days since you've properly slept," Sophia observed, watching Elena pace around the crate like a moth circling flame. "This isn't healthy research anymore, Elena. This is obsession." The voice responded before Elena could. "Obsession is merely passion misunderstood by those who lack vision. Dr. Vasquez understands that some discoveries transcend conventional wisdom." Sophia shuddered. "It's talking to you directly now." "That can't be good." But Elena was no longer listening to her colleague. The voice had begun sharing fragments of knowledge, tantalizing glimpses of historical events, lost civilizations, and archaeological sites that would revolutionize their understanding of human history. It spoke of Atlantis not as myth, but as historical fact, of ancient technologies that could solve climate change, of medical knowledge that could eliminate disease. Asterisk. "The civilization that created me understood truths your modern world has forgotten." The voice continued, its tone growing hypnotic. "They knew how to harness the Earth's energy, how to communicate across vast distances without technology, how to extend human life far beyond your current limitations. All this knowledge could be yours, Dr. Vasquez. All you need do is lift the lid." Elena's hands trembled as she approached the crate. The iron bindings looked less corroded now, the wood less waterlogged. Even the barnacles seemed to pulse with subtle life. "Elena, step away from it." Sophia's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Just think," the voice crooned, "of the papers you could publish, the discoveries you could make. Your name would eclipse those of Howard Carter, Mary Leakey, Hiram Bingham. You would be remembered not just as an archaeologist, but as the woman who revolutionized human understanding." Elena's rational mind screamed warnings, but they seemed distant compared to the voice's seductive promises. Her fingers touched the corroded iron straps, and she felt them warm beneath her touch. The metal began to bend, as if eager to release its contents. "Elena!" Sophia grabbed her shoulders, spinning her around. "Look at yourself. Look at what this thing is doing to you." For a moment, Elena saw her reflection in Sophia's terrified eyes, wild hair, bloodshot eyes, skin pale as bone. She looked like a woman possessed, which perhaps she was. The voice hissed its displeasure. "Do not let fear make you a coward. Dr. Vasquez, you are so close to greatness, so close to truth." Elena jerked her hands away from the crate, backing toward the laboratory door. But even as she retreated, she could feel its pull, like a tide drawing her inexorably back to shore. "We need to get off this ship," Sophia whispered. "We need to get away from that thing before it's too late." But as Elena looked back at the crate, she wondered if it already was. Asterisk, the 7th night brought them visitors. Elena had finally succumbed to exhaustion, collapsing in her bunk for the first real sleep in days. But rest brought no peace. Instead, she found herself standing on the deck of a different ship, one with tall masts and billowing sails, its wooden planks slick with spray from towering waves. The HMS Retribution sailed through a storm that defied nature. Lightning crackled not from the sky, but from the sea itself, and the waves glowed with an eerie phosphorescence that hurt to look upon. Around her, spectral figures moved with the practiced efficiency of an experienced crew, their faces pale as moonlight. "You should not have disturbed our rest," said a voice behind her. Elena turned to see a man in a naval uniform, his captain's insignia tarnished by decades underwater. Captain William Hartwell's journal had described him as a robust man in his 40s, but death had left him gaunt and hollow-eyed. "Captain Hartwell?" Elena's voice sounded strange in the dream space, echoing as if spoken in a vast cathedral. "Aye, though I've not worn that title with pride for many years." His gaze fixed on something beyond Elena's shoulder, the spectral. outline of the crate, which had somehow followed her into this vision. "We tried to warn you. All of us tried." Other figures gathered around them, crew members and passengers, all bearing the marks of violent death. Some showed signs of drowning, others worse fates Elena didn't want to contemplate. "What happened?" "To your ship?" Elena asked, though part of her already knew. "Blackwood happened," spat a sailor with a gaping wound across his throat. "Mad scholar and his cursed box. Said he was protecting the world, but he doomed us all." Captain Hartwell silenced the sailor with a gesture. Alistair Blackwood was many things: arrogant, obsessed, perhaps mad, but he was not evil. He genuinely believed he was saving humanity from something far worse than death. The spectral ship lurched as if struck by a massive wave, though Elena felt no wind. Around them, the crew began to panic, pointing toward the cargo hold where an unnatural light was beginning to seep through the deck planks. "It started slowly," Hartwell continued, his voice barely audible above the supernatural storm. "Whispers in the dark, tools moving on their own, crew members sleepwalking toward the hold." Blackwood tried to strengthen his bindings, but the entity had already begun to influence minds. Elena watched in horror as spectral sailors threw themselves overboard, their faces twisted with unnatural ecstasy. Others turned on their shipmates with knives and belaying pins, their eyes reflecting the same eerie light that pulsed from below decks. "Blackwood made a choice," Hartwell said. "He could let the thing escape and spread its influence across the world, or he could ensure it remained contained. He chose sacrifice." The vision shifted, and Elena found herself in the cargo hold, watching a tall, gaunt man in scholar's robes kneeling before the crate. Alistair Blackwood's lips moved in constant prayer or incantation, his hands weaving complex patterns in the air above the container. As she watched, his life force seemed to drain into the bindings, his sacrifice becoming part of the prison itself. "He bound his soul to the container," Hartwell explained, "made himself the final lock. As long as his will remains strong, the entity stays contained. But wills can weaken, Dr. Vasquez, especially when faced with minds it can manipulate." The vision faded, leaving Elena gasping in her bunk aboard the Cousteau's Dream. But Hartwell's final words followed her into waking. "The voice you hear is not Blackwood's, Doctor. It is the thing pretending to be him. And it has been studying you, learning your weaknesses, preparing to use them against you. If you open that crate, you will not be releasing a scholar seeking peace. You will be unleashing the very evil he died to contain." Elena sat up in her narrow bunk, cold sweat covering her skin. Through the thin walls, she could hear the voice calling to her from the laboratory, no longer bothering with deception. Its tone was hungry now, impatient, filled with ancient MLALEVOENCE. Dawn was still hours away, but Elena knew sleep would not return. She had a choice to make, and precious little time to make it. The morning sun found Elena standing on the ship's deck, staring out at the endless Pacific. The voice had been calling to her all night, its tone growing increasingly desperate as sunrise approached. But now, armed with the truth from her spectral visitors, she could hear the deception beneath. Its words. Sophia joined her at the rail, looking as exhausted as Elena felt. "The dreams? You had them too?" "We all did," Sophia confirmed. "Marcus is talking about taking the life raft and swimming to shore. Captain Torres is threatening to throw the crate overboard himself if we don't make a decision soon." Elena nodded, unsurprised. The entity's influence had been growing stronger, affecting everyone aboard. But knowing the truth gave her clarity she'd lacked for days. "It's not Blackwood," she said simply. "The voice we've been hearing, it's the thing he died to contain." Sophia gripped the rail tighter. "Then we need to—" A thunderous crack interrupted her. Both women spun to see Marcus stumbling from the laboratory, his face twisted with unnatural euphoria. Behind him, iron straps lay scattered across the deck like discarded chains. "It's almost free," Marcus laughed, his voice carrying harmonics that didn't belong to human vocal cords. "It showed me wonders, Elena. Cities beneath the waves, technologies beyond imagination. All we have to do is lift the lid." Elena ran toward the laboratory. Sophia closed behind. The crate sat open just a crack, darkness seeping from the gap like liquid shadow. The temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees, and their breath came out in visible puffs. "Dr. Vasquez," the voice called, no longer bothering to disguise its alien nature. "Join your colleague. See what awaits those wise enough to embrace truth over superstition." Marcus moved toward the crate with jerky, puppet-like motions. Elena could see the entity's influence spreading across his face like frost on glass, transforming his familiar features into something hungry and predatory. "Marcus, fight it," Elena pleaded, but she could see it was too late. The thing that had been her graduate student reached for the crate's lid. Elena made her choice. She lunged forward, slamming the crate shut with both hands. The contact burned like touching dry ice, but she held on as the entity screamed its rage through the wooden prison. Ancient words poured from her lips, not her own knowledge, but something Blackwood's spirit had shared during the vision. Clausus menit, malum non liberator, in tenebris aeternum. The Latin binding spell sent shockwaves through the laboratory. Marcus collapsed, the alien intelligence fleeing his mind like smoke in a strong wind. The temperature began to return to normal, and the oppressive presence that had haunted them for days started to fade. But Elena could feel her own life force being drawn into the binding, just as Blackwood's had been over 170 years ago. The scholar's sacrifice had weakened over time, requiring renewal. She understood now why the entity had worked so hard to manipulate her into opening the crate. It needed someone with both the knowledge and will to maintain the prison. "Elena!" Sophia grabbed her as she swayed on her feet. "What's happening?" "Completing the binding," Elena whispered, feeling decades of her life flowing into the mystical locks. "Blackwood's sacrifice is failing. It needs to be renewed." The crate settled back into dormancy, its alien occupant once again securely contained. But Elena had aged 20 years in as many seconds, her hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with the cost of containing ancient evil. Asterisk, asterisk.